Hello everyone and welcome to another live stream. Can't believe they are coming around so fast and there is so much to go through on this one compared to some of the recent ones where I haven't been doing a lot of physical modelling. I've actually been doing mostly online. At the moment it's a bit of a mix. There's certainly quite a lot of physical modelling going on. I'm having a bit of a rest where I'm tentatively sort of starting on the next Kickstarter perhaps, but mostly doing 2 or 3 big projects. I'm going to be talking about them this evening, but first, welcome to everybody in chat. I can see quite a few of the usuals in there. Norm has definitely turned up, and thanks to Norm, Digger and Timber, my moderators. I haven't seen Digger or Timber on yet, but I'm sure they'll slide in. And thanks for all the work they do on keeping out anybody dodgy or make rude comments about my hair or whatever it is they actually do. But thanks folks, and welcome to the people I have already seen in chat. And I noticed that Stephen just slipped in. Hope it's all okay in Scotland and it wasn't too wet and windy. The tree on the corner of my road came down overnight, or perhaps it was yesterday, who knows. And it's certainly been breezy here today. The wind kept me up most of last night howling around, and my bamboo has been bending practically double. So it's certainly been windy. Quite a few down trees, and I was worried about the 3D printers. I went out at one point because all the lights, which is rare in the UK, but the lights were flickering in my house, and the UPS was beeping like mad. It wasn't very happy, and thankfully all the FDM printers just went through, and the resin printers on FDM, because I had 4 printers running at the time. No problems, they all kept going, so that was good. So Nicholas, welcome. Nicholas has just come into chat. Good to have you here. And I have 3 big projects I'm talking about tonight, and the topic of analysis paralysis is the sort of first one I'm actually going to talk about. It actually has a video, but it's about a quarter of an hour. And then I've got potentially an hour video. But if you remember the last live stream, my hour-and-a-half video that I was using to time how long I had left hadn't even got halfway through, and I think it's because on my NAS, so it was coming down through the ether, I don't know, because it's not actually hardwired, but through the ether to the computer too slowly, and because it was on fast forward I couldn't tell. So I'm hoping that this time I've put it on my hard drive and it will actually be going at the normal speed and we'll get the full hour in, because I was so confused when I realised it was 10 o'clock last time. So here we go. So Stephen was supposed to be working tonight on the A95. It was cancelled because of weather. The weather's good for some things then. I didn't walk around the park either today or yesterday because it was horizontal rain, and I guess, you know, I'm not that hard. So Polite pointed out it's the very last stream for this year. I hadn't thought of that. They do come around very quickly, and it means it won't be long until the first one in the new year. So we'll start the year off very, very, very prompt, I guess. Norm's going to give me a countdown, presumably for the end. So this should be the Christmas special, according to stating the obvious. It's not very Christmassy. I don't really put Christmas decorations up because I'm curmudgeonly, and then I've already got too many Master Chiefs and Emperor Giorgios and everything in the house already. I haven't actually anywhere to put a tree. So I just go around and sort it at my mum's house and my sister's, so I do it there instead. Oh, Stephen says he got the Circle of Doom. I'm not quite sure why. I've turned off everything that goes onto the internet. I think sometimes it just, you know, it's there. I'm paying for full fibre, but I don't think it's always that fast. So apologies if you do get the Circle of Doom. When I play the actual video, I thought it was stalling a lot last time, which could be the speed it was coming down as much as the speed it was going up. But there we go. And also, if I was using the internet in the house, it would be slowing it. I'm not doing that this week though, so let's hope for better. So I have been working, I'm actually going to talk very briefly about the project I haven't got anything on about. Oh, Digger's snuck into chat. Hi Digger. Don't worry, I've already thanked you for being a moderator and said you'd sneak in late. So yeah. Stephen's blaming the Martians. I think that's for the Circle of Doom. Tripods, if there's any 3s around, it's them. So the third project I've been working on, and this is quite a... I want to do a set of sewers for my junk room city, so I'm doing a sewer district. And at the moment, I am thinking very hard about sewers. So So it's been very exciting. I put them up on Discord, and the first comments I got was, well, sewers have to be angled and they have to be this. And I'm like, it's going to be on a square because it's for modelling. You know, anyway, I've got most of the sewers done. I think I've got a fan and maybe a bit of equipment will come later as a stretch goal. But I think I've got a fan to go in, and then I'm about done on the sewers. Oh, and I've got a narrow to wide sections to do. But apart from that, I'm nearly done on sewers. And I've been thinking about other things to do. So it's the sewer district. It's going to be Sub-City Sewer District. And someone said to me, why are you doing sewers? Did you like do a lot of market research and people wanted sewers? And I'm like, no, I wanted them for mine. So they seem like a good thing. So there's going to be sewers, air vents, service corridors, water pipes, power conduits, those sorts of things. And some of those might be in stretch goals and some of them will be in the main campaign. So I won't model them until they get too far along. Oh, and Jeffrey's come into chat and said it's his birthday. Happy birthday, Jeffrey. Good to have you here. And I really hope you had a great day and continue having a great day as it's not over yet. So I've been thinking a lot about vents, because air vents is next. And this isn't mine. This is a David Chef flex duct, he calls it. And I really like it because it just clicks together. And one reason I bought the ARCS campaign, apart from that, it's brilliant, was to see how this worked. And it just clicks together. It's slightly bendy in FDM, and you can see it will compress down to there, and then it will open up to there. But it doesn't look like the kind of vent I want. I want a traditional metal vent, you know, with the little square duct and then bits around the outside every now and then. And I'm struggling. I was looking at clip together, like trunking you get for cables, which people have, but they don't need to have fixed sides. So I was trying something, this was just a test really, to see how much movement I could get if I moved things up and what would happen to the walls. And I'm really struggling to work out how to do this. I don't like this one at all. I like this one, but it needs the in-out, and I didn't want a corrugated look necessarily. I don't want to just nick David Chef's ideas. Though he always has great ones, and if you haven't bought his terrain, he does brilliant stuff, so I recommend it. He used to be Squamous Miniatures, and his ARCS has been brilliant, so definitely worth getting it, though the price has now shot off. So yeah. Oh, Jeffrey says he's suffering from wind. Oh, poor thing. Baked beans, my mum would say, or my dad would say, actually, not my mum. Norm says too much cake. So yes, if anyone's got any great ideas about sort of flexible sections that you can curve but whose walls stay together, that I could use as a sort of physical practical model. I mean, this is great in some ways, and I just need to decide what it is that I want, I guess, and maybe change it around a bit. Anyway, that's probably making annoying clunking noises. And he hasn't put a top on, and I noticed that I've squeezed it a lot now at that end. So yeah, so I'm still thinking a lot about that. That's what I was doing this afternoon. Oh, and we've got Monique from Brisbane. Hi Monique, good to have you here early in the morning for that part of the world. And yeah, definitely earlier than I'm getting up probably to get to this. So apart from that sort of thing, my sewers have been, I've done some monsters this week, I've done sewer cleaners, it's been quite fun, but I'm doing it because I'm doing Junk Room City. And I wanted to have some sort of conduits and water pipes and powered service tunnels. I wanted to have a whole level of them on my Junk Room City. If you haven't heard about Junk Room City, I'm about to play a 1/4 video on it. But the concept is very much Coruscant from Star Wars is a city planet. There's plenty of other city planets like Taris in the Old Republic. There's plenty of other city planets in Star Wars. And the idea is that there's multiple levels. The sort of bottom level is right at ground and nobody goes there, and it's probably uninhabitable now, and you've built up over the years higher and higher. And obviously the lower levels are a bit drossy, not very nice, very gang-ridden, very full of criminals. People who can't afford anything live there. And then coming down through it are these giant ducts for spaceships. You see a lot in Clone Wars, but also for air to get down into the planet core. So there's a lot of fans and things like that. So that is what I have been looking at and working on and thinking about. And we'll get to the analysis paralysis part of this subject in a second, but I think I'll play the video first. But Jeffrey has pointed out it's the weather, not the baked beans. And Stephen says, start building my layout. Can't decide whether to go end to end or tail chaser. That's a decision that I think comes down to, do you have an easy way to get up into the middle? As people get older, you know, duck unders and crawling under layouts gets less exciting. I used to come up in the middle of mine in my loft, so it was okay to do a round around. If you enjoy sitting there and watching trains go past, you can't really beat a roundy for that, because you don't have to do anything. You can literally just put it going. But I never sat there and watched my trains go around. For me, the joy is in the building rather than the having. So I would have preferred end to end, I think, just because then I could have done it more modular and things like that. So I would definitely say, if you enjoy watching trains go round and round, then you really can't beat just watching it. And actually looking in chat, Digger says the same, and so does Monique. You can always have a bit of an end-to-end sort of vibe in it, but you can't just run a train, put it to go and run a train if it's end-to-end. You have to always be doing it prototypically and properly. And that's fine if that's what you love, but if you just want a bit of fun, have it go round and round. So Digger says, I set my trains going round and then work on the layout as they go round and round. See, I think this was my thing. I didn't want the dust in my layout room, and it was full of layout. There was nothing else in there. There was no room to work up there. So I never worked in it. So I never actually then put it to go. Probably one of the reasons I fell out of love was it was in a different room and I never went up there. Really, I was worked down and then just installed stuff. So it became almost just like a destination, just like Junk Room City. So now I've got Junk Room City instead, but without trains and taking up a lot less space in my house. So I'm going to play that video. Let's see if it works. And I'm still moving this week. So this is Junk Room City. It's got a few subtitles, which I hope I don't interrupt. And the first thing, I've done two things, the frame and the shelves. The shelves aren't finished. So this is, it's eventually going to be edited into a YouTube video, so this was quite useful. So there's definitely a lot of excitement about framing and shelving in this video. That's mostly what I've been doing. So you can see here, I finally got the room clean. That was good. And I haven't got anywhere to put any of the electronics. But this took me ages to work out where all the joiners were going, all the sort of gaps. I literally was like, where do these all come? And I'd forgotten one of the middle ones. And I actually had to buy a chop saw for this. I hate circular saws, and I was a bit reluctant for this, and I'll probably get rid of it due to space considerations eventually. The weather was at least good enough for one day. I had a really good day, very blessed. The one day I wanted to do it, it was dry, it wasn't too cold, and I was able to make and actually capture some really good sparks for the video. So here we go, slow-mo sparks. Actually, I don't think that was slow-mo, but there is a slow-mo version. And you can tell because that is real slow-mo. And I left it as slow-mo because I thought, hey, you can get the full experience then. Yeah, and as Monique says, you can have end-to-end sidings and industrial sections, and then Digger just says, I just stick weeds and litter on the ground. Yeah, something to do, isn't it? So I measured these a lot because it's crucial, because the heights are all dependent, the shelves will all be level based on whether I get these or not. And I meant to put them all perforated the same way up and then totally forgot. So I meant them all to have the neat one at the bottom and then on the perforated slotted ones, which are for framing, and then put the cut ones at the top, and I totally forgot. So I hope it's all level and my cutting was vaguely accurate, but I think it's all within a millimetre or so. It may not be 100% straight because the paving slabs aren't 100% straight, which is really frustrating. I did try and get everything level, but yeah. And I have to say, these are very heavy, solid metal. I'm not entirely 100% sure everything's 110% or 90 degrees straight on the actual frame. I was putting one of the shelves up there, and I think the shelves are square. I'm pretty sure the shelves are square. And it didn't seem to be as close on one end as the other, and I was just like, oh, this is just, yeah, let's hope it's square. So I may have to just shuffle everything around a bit to get it all squared up. But the, this is a slow-mo out of focus one as well, just to, this is really artistic, this, when you get out of focus slow-mo. That's obviously the camera focused on the slab, but yeah. Yeah, I just noticed Digger says, looking very professional, Kathy. Oh yeah, very professional until you see the out of focus shot. But I left it in because I thought it was fun. So yeah, I did this, really happy. I cut them all in one day. There's no way I would have done this in my house. It puts loads of, as you can see, hot bits of metal everywhere, which would no doubt stick to wherever I had. But I have nowhere for dirty work in my house, which is what's slowing down the Trailblazer, which is the other project we'll be looking at this evening, and this. I need to cut a hole, and my analysis paralysis is about the holes, and we'll get to that in a sec. So I need to cut some holes, and that needs to be outside. And it's, as you can guess from the chat, if you're not in the UK, it's been very, very wet the last couple of days when I perhaps might have gone to the holes. So I've been doing other things instead. I've actually decided to 3D print some of the stuff that's going in the hole just to check it. So what I found was that this actually had loads of burrs that were very, like little metal slices. And although I'm using my finger to check it smooth, I did have to go with the file and smooth everything off a lot because I'm banging it into those joints, so I need it to be smooth or it won't go down properly. There we go. Jaw 21, sorry a bit late, helping feed strings through baubles. Sounds important. Yep. So this is me putting the frame up. You can see my displays on my left. It's not arranged, and a lot of those dioramas need a little bit of TLC. You'll probably see me bump into the snow one a few times as well. And I'm going to be honest, I got this done, put it together, and I haven't squared it up yet with the square, so it may just need a bit of the back pushing down a bit and the front pushing just to square it, as I said. But I couldn't lift the top. Because there's not a lot of space, I can't get 3 foot to the side. I can't lift this like flat and then turn it round because it would hit because of the angles. So I needed to deadlift upwards the top onto the uprights, and I couldn't. I literally physically couldn't lift it. So John, who's on the chat, spent, I hope it was a happy afternoon, coming around helping. I accosted him in the park and said, John, would you mind, I may even have texted, would you mind coming and helping me lift the metal on? So he came, and you will see him briefly on camera, but considering the camera was going for so long, he managed to keep out of it, and he never shows you his face, so he's, kept his enigma going. Delphic film, Titan Saw, named after a Scotsman and his wallet. Yeah. John, it was a fun afternoon helping. Yeah, I don't think Bracken would have appreciated it, so there we go. But yeah, it's one of those things. I live on my own, and I used to get my mum, she's now 81, and she's having a knee operation in less than a month because she can hardly walk. So she can't get upstairs easily. So she's not really in the ability to come and lift. And she's the person I would have got in the past to come and help. Now I'm just, just get John instead. So there we go. Thank you, John. I really did appreciate it. So yeah, and I just wish my bright red knickers weren't showing, but let's not go there. So it's actually surprisingly easy. So it's a metal hollow steel, very solid, and I couldn't bang it down onto these down. John spent, not on camera, I'd stopped recording by that point, probably about half an hour just banging everything back down the last couple of millimetres because there wasn't a lot of swing and it wasn't easy by the time you're on the top banging down. These bits here I could bang home, and all bar one joint were quite tough. you know, they fitted on. He said it's not meant to be taken apart and put back together a lot. So it is a sort of push fit and it's together, and it's metal in the middle and then ABS plastic. So it's fairly tough. I think it should be fairly tight, but it did get banged a lot back and forth. So I'm going to guess that it isn't quite square yet. So I'll get the squares out and just square up the middle section at least before I put any shelves on. And you saw the clips right at the beginning of this, but there's two different types. And because of the slope on the far side, that back roof kind of slopes upwards. It's where the roof is outside. There's like a lower section over the far side, and then the near section is taller. And there's actually three. This is me trying to lift this. Yep, can't lift it. There's John. There we are. That's all you really get to see of him. And then he disappeared off camera. Occasionally you see an arm, and that's about it. And then he came and did all this banging as well afterwards. It just wouldn't bang that last little bit, you know. It just was really, and he has more upper arm strength than I do, let's put it that way. Obviously very girly and useless at this. And banging it all sort of side together. So I think it's fairly robust and solid. It's certainly, once it's got all the shelves on, hey, here's the shelves, I think it's going to be really, really sort of cool looking and solid. So this is the wood. This was also another workout, lugging all this in the car, my poor car. And it's 12mm, and actually it's all cut really well by Selco, who are just at the local builders merchants. I mean, they're a national chain, I think. And all I've done so far is just smooth the edges, not necessarily perfectly. I am going to paint them all black, which will be outside. Yeah. With all the rain that's going on, I'm not sure how. So they're all the same depth as we were looking at the frame. That's from left to right, which is from front to back. But they're not all the same width, because on the top shelves, there's a metal bar and they sit on clips into it. But on the sort of lower shelves and the sort of middle shelves, they're on sort of those perforated clips, and so they sit to the side into it so that you can screw into the sides. So all the different shelves, there's a different size. Certainly on the left hand side with the slope and everything, I think practically every single shelf is different. It really is. And I've probably got about 18 centimetres on the top shelf that it could have gone further over. I was just aired a bit on the side of caution on the curvy bits. So Bill from Woolly Waste has arrived. Hi Bill, and Bill Forrest. Good evening everyone. Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year to you and Kathy all. Can't stay this evening, unfortunately, so I'll just say my greetings and felicitations just now. Well, thanks Bill. Good to see you, if only for 5 minutes. See you later. So, okay, we're on to analysis paralysis moment. So some of these need a circular hole in them for the spaceship access and those ventilation ducts. And there is going to be newer buildings going around the outside. And I've tried it in 3D, I've modelled it in Blender, and I just couldn't get my head around where that circle wanted to go. Originally I was going to do it as a U, but then I decided the circle will enable me to put stuff at the front. So in the end, I've put out, this is probably taller, the gap on the shelves, than many of the shelves will be, because I want a really claustrophobic, crammed in feeling. You know, this is the lower levels. And these are either my Severna Spaceport or my modular landing pads Kickstarters, and that's the sci-fi. And I need to know where the circle is going and how big the circle is. Because I can't do anything until I know where that's going. And part of that is actually there's going to be tiles that fit on here that I'm probably not even going to clip. They're probably just going to rest on here with the outsides kind of clipped together, maybe. Yeah, I don't want a lot of height put it that way, and all the print time for no particular gain. So I'm going to print some foot tiles that are going to have patterns on for the bases, and then everything neat will go on the 256 size bamboos. But this is a shelf height. And actually I put that ring landing pad and it just fits in this gap here, so it's perhaps taller than you think this, but I think this is one of the tallest. Some of them are going to be as low as sort of 150, 100, and the sewer one probably is only going to be 100 deep. So I can get to the back when it's 200 high because I need to get my shoulder in, but I can't get to the back easily if it's lower. So, and there isn't, you've seen how big the frame is in the room. I can't put a 3-foot shelf in anyway. It just isn't room to the side of it. So I'm probably going to model it in 6-inch tiles and maybe put those in, slide everything in. I've got ceilings to go in, so they probably want to screw into the one above or clip into the central hole or have something that holds it up. There are lifts that go between the levels, so I can definitely, I'm actually going to put them on the front though rather than here, but I might be able to put some between and use those as extras. And then there's loads of big buildings like that big grey one at the back that will just fill out holes that are going to be hard to reach. So some of my buildings are complete and they don't have interiors, and they're going to be at the back, and the better ones are going to be at the front. I know, and you know, this is a lot of buildings actually from a Kickstarter, and this is a 4x3 board, and you can see that it can swallow a lot until you put one of those giant ring landing pads in, and in the middle of them I'm going to have spaceships hanging. All of those solid circles here will be see-through in some way. I'll be making them like struts or vents or big fans or something, banks of those. So I need to decide all that before I cut the holes. So printing at the moment is a ring that just has a bit of light on it, and that's it. And then printing after that is the next thing, which is going to be that actual spaceport section, and it's actually quite high. It's at this kind of level eye height. It's the one on the left hand side on top of the metal, so it's actually got a slope coming out of one side, but I'm hoping I can get a whole circle in on that one, and I'm going to print a whole circle anyway, and the ceiling that's there will sort of be held up in the middle. I put clips in. I'm going to test it, but I also need to light some of these things. So I was trying to leave gaps for LED strips and work out what the spacing on the LED strips are. I've got a pile down here I was testing, and I'm going to cut them because obviously they don't go around a circle properly. And I haven't actually, I haven't put it to print, thankfully. I forgot to put the clip holes in. Oh, good thing I did this here. I need to put some clip holes in, but I will glue it as well for solidity on all of these. These clip holes are more for alignment, but I forgot to put them in. Okay, note to self, before I put that one to print, it's got some cutting circles as well that are printing that I think are going to be I'm going to go around the outside of it, and I'm just going to glue those together with a bit of masking tape or something, and they're just 4 big, they're big, I can only get one on my plus, which prints 320 square, and they're going to be, I'm going to use those and then measure from them and measure from the sides and be able to, get those in. And before I screw anything in, whilst it's being held, I can just line up my circles and make sure everything fits. That's the theory. But I spent a lot of time just not doing anything because of these circles. I really, really struggled conceptually, and I knew I wanted them, but as soon as I put the ring landing pad in the sort of 3D model, I was like, okay, so these are columns, and they're solid columns in all the things you see of them. They're like tunnels down, and I was just struggling conceptually how to do a tunnel with how to do it so I don't block the back of the thing, but I also want to be able to see the spaceships inside it. I don't know, I was just really struggling. So there was a lot of struggle and a lot of thoughts, and I really just wanted to understand how it would work. And in the end, I had to get it out, as you saw, and put it out and physically just look at it to see how it worked. So I did this for my Patreon tip on Tuesday for my Patreon videos, but realistically, sometimes you can do it in your 3D programs till you're blue in the face, but sometimes you just need to physically get the models out. So all the models are out around the house now from under my bed. I will start assembling them and putting them together. And I've then got the 3-foot one to make the same decisions on. That's a smaller circle, so it won't take as much space out. And actually, the circle is going to be as big as the ring landing pad on most of them. But if I go back to right at the end here, whoops, video. If I go right to this end and just pause it. So if you look at this, you're actually lined up to look through the front here, so you'll be able to see through the bulk of that section. And this is the height of the shelf. I've actually got a bit sticking out now so that the shelf above rests slightly on it. So I hope it all just keeps it from bending too much. And so this orange one is on the last print at the moment, and that just clips together and goes into the hole. Then I've got the cutter to do, and then I'm going to do this one, which I forgot to do the clip holes on. I put it into quarters today, and what I just need to do is make sure that I put the cutter there, I just didn't actually use it, if that makes sense. I didn't put the clip holes in. I got it all lined up, but I forgot to actually use it. So what I need to do is, it prints from the top down, so it's upside down, because otherwise that big gap wouldn't work. I need to put it in and check that it looks good. Everything's on 50 centimetre increments for the heights. So I've planned into here, since I did this, a little bit of a ring and then some clips. And I will end up probably gluing the ceiling tiles to it upside down and then sliding it in as much as I can. It's going to be interesting because it is quite big, and I can't glue all 4 foot by 3 foot. So it will be the nearer ones that get glued. But I'm thinking then that I don't know how to attach them. I think I'm going to have to screw them onto the shelf above to keep them attached. Or they rest on the walls or something. The span actually isn't too bad. They probably will cope with it, and I will, as I said, do them in sort of foots. Anyway, there's a lot of thought, as you can see, about the order it goes in. So something like this can slide in and it will line up then with the circular hole that's there. And again, I didn't actually put any clips in vertically or whatever, because there's nowhere to clip it to height wise, so it will just line up and sit in there, and I'll probably end up putting a little bit of glue on or something just to hold it in place, but maybe only a couple of dabs because I do want it to be removable. And yeah, but the point is that the circles are going to be lined by 3D print, so even if I do cut them slightly cackly, it's not a problem. It's a problem if I make a massive error, but it's not a problem if I'm a few mil out or anything, because they are going to have a big bit of plastic 3D print over the top to hide it. And this one here that is orange has holes in for lighting. So I'm going to get all that sorted. And it may be that they iterate, that I don't like them and I redo them. It's just 3D print time and design time. But it may be that I do them and go, actually, I'm not happy with it. I need to change something. Those big things that stick out, there's actually a numbering on it as well. It now says 3,200 because this is level 3200 and it goes down to level 0. Every 50 is an increment of 100 on the sort of height going up. So this is level 3200. It's quite near the top of the spaceport. And where that sort of fan hood sticks out, there's actually a light. So from above, you can slot in get the wiring, and the wiring will run on the ceiling to the back. So it will go in a ceiling tile and push in and go to the back. That's the theory anyway. So there we go. So let's have a look. Stephen just bashed the like button. I see we're fairly good. We've got 27 viewers and 21 likes. So that's fairly good. That was 15 minutes, Kathy. That was good. That was good. It was supposed to be 13:49 or something, so that was good. George21, bit off topic. Has anyone seen any of the drones in the sky recently? No. You mean the alien invasion? No, I haven't seen any. It's been raining and I haven't looked up, to be honest. I see plenty of planes. We saw the A380, the really big Airbus, the double-decker going into Birmingham the other day, flying in low over the park, but that was cool. So Rolando Ratas Hi Kathy, many thanks for your modelling with snow powders and flocks video from 5 years ago. It really helped me making a snowy grass FX for my roll up 6 foot by 4 foot green grass roll for wargaming. That sounds cool. That sounds very cool. I bet you lose quite a bit of snow every time you roll it and roll it as well. So that's cool. And Monique's liked, so thanks to Monique too. So that is Junkroom City. The next steps are to get some 3D prints done and work it all out. And I need to start at the top because I need to screw in the shelves and then work down. And to screw in, you need to be able to get a screwdriver underneath. And some of the shelves are quite narrow, as I said, and I only use my drill driver because it will be putting short screws into the plywood. I'll probably drill some pilot holes and have a go. And there's one that's into the clips. It's the very top one. And I need to get this done because it's going to rest on this in the middle. This is the problem actually. This section here, this is the top shelf at the top that you can see there's just a little shallow ring. And then there's another big shelf. And then actually I think, so the top shelf is literally just the top of the layout. There's nothing going on it except the light. But this shelf here has stuff on it. So yeah, there's quite a lot of thought needed on how everything goes together still. So I can, I think there'll be quite a lot of weight on these. And I was wondering whether it will be, I don't think the 3D print will take it. So I was wondering about sliding in some metal or something into it, like some slotted rods to just, threaded rod to go through, just to put a bit of torsion on the middle. I don't know. It makes it very permanent, that section. But this one has got shells hanging in midair. The other side hasn't, so it will be more slot in. But for this one, it's kind of pushing up and pushing down, and I would bolt it round. I need to think about it a lot. But the shelf that is the bottom that it would be bolting onto is this one, and I printed these with no holes in. I mean, they're not big prints to redo, and they're almost like a test one at the moment to see whether it's going to work. And I actually want to do them some writing on. I didn't do any writing on them, so I would like to do some warning and do not cross lines and stuff like that. So I'm probably going to end up reprinting them anyway. And if I do that, then I wonder whether threaded rod, this is the height of the whole section, and this is nearly 600 across, so it's nearly 2 foot across, so it's 3 or 4 foot high. So I wonder whether 4 threaded rods would be the answer, and I'll need to think about that and maybe put in something to be able to put the threaded rods on there. Perhaps one to think about before I start printing anything else. Anyway, so that has a lot of thoughts, and my problem really has been just allowing the thoughts to get ahead of any modelling. And sometimes I just print just to get some printing done, just so that even if I throw it in the bin, it's helped me on an iteration, which is very wasteful, I know. And it's fine when it's this size. These were thoughts, you can see they were never meant to be anything. They were thoughts more than anything else. Whether I liked this method, I don't, but it was a thought process. And it was like an hour print. It didn't take a lot. Yeah, that's just the way I work. So I had a lot of problems with just not wanting to push forward. I think I know the location now, having had everything, of where my circles are going. The question now is how to brace everything so that those top shelves are supported all the way through. And I'm thinking that actually I will end up doing threaded rods, probably with nuts, and threading everything through just to try and, I don't know, just make something that has some support, not sitting on the 3D print in those particular shelves. Right, anyway, let's have a look at chat. Rolando, if there are any railway enthusiasts here who know of a 6 foot by 4 foot roll-up snowy grass textured grass roll to buy, I'll be eternally grateful. That is a big roll to have. Generally, they come in like a foot square because you normally rip them up to put them on your layout. But there we go. Timber's there. Hi, Timber. I just realised you snuck in. Nice to see you. Stephen, I had to dodge a few seagulls last week when we were flying circuits around the airport, but no drones so far. Okay. Rolando, this is interesting as I've upgraded my Elegoo resin to Saturn 3 and bought an FDM Elegoo Neptune 4 recently for terrain printing. Yeah, I have. I had 2 Neptune 3 Pros, which were great till I ran over to a matte filament through them and basically screwed up the interior, so I needed new extruders. So I've now moved to bamboo, which I really like. But my Neptune 3 Plus will be doing most of the printing for this. So it's in fewer pieces for just structural integrity reasons. Deltic film. I do like how solid the frame is. Many of the layouts I've filmed on are very wobbly trestles. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do all that work and put it on something that's flimsy because I'd be worried it would collapse. And actually there's quite a lot of weight in the wood that I need to hold up. The biggest problem is the clips are not that solid. So I'm doubling up on every single strut with clips if I can. Except the middle one, which I can't because they'd be overlapping into the other side. But yeah. Monique says, Hecky do gravel and grass mats, but they're only 1 metre by 0.75. You could stick them to fabric and spray paint them maybe. Rolando, I assume you're an FDM 3D printer rather than resin. Do you ever have problems with layer lines with FDM terrain printing? Do you get the sandpaper out or use some other technique to get rid of them? So I do both. I have both. I use a resin for figures. I've got a Rancor printing at the moment from Star Wars. This, I mentioned it earlier, it's David Chef's model. That is printed at 0.08 in matte filament on my bamboo. 0.08, I was doing 0.1 on my Neptunes, it just takes a long time. You can see the layer lines if you really look. I like matte filament. I like it for 2 reasons. One, that looks great and I can take photos of it without painting it. It's really cool. And the layer lines just don't show on the photos because it's matte. 2, it sands well. It actually sands. Unlike normal PLA, it actually does sand back. So you can just sand it like normal. Not necessarily like ABS. And it will, if you use a power tool on it, it will heat and chug just like normal PLA will, I think. I've never actually used a power tool on it. But it does sand beautifully smooth. So I'm a real fan of it from a sanding point of view. Downside is it wears through your machines. I've already put a second nozzle on my first bamboo and I only got it in October, September. I got it in time for the last Kickstarter, so maybe end of August, start of September. Maybe I'm just, you know. And I put a new nozzle on last week before last, because I was having a lot of problems with the Trailblazer, and we'll be talking about that next, all about my printing problems with that, which were me, not it, most of the time. So yeah, I like matte, but it does wear through. It wore through actually some of the gears on the inside of my Elegoo, so I was just going to put a new extruder on. I'll be intrigued to see what the bamboo is like. I think I'm working on the principle that I like matte. I'm using bamboo matte at the moment. If it wears through more quickly, I understand that. To me, it's worth it because I don't need to paint that. Not this is mine, but I don't need to paint it, and I can probably just put a wash on it and call it good. But that's really good for when I'm doing a Kickstarter, because I don't actually want to paint them. Because if I paint them, people might judge on my paint skills rather than on the model. So there we go. So yeah, so how do I get rid of layer lines? Sandpaper is really bad on PLA. You do better to scrape or to fill and sand. So you can knock it back a bit with sandpaper, and some sand better than others. It depends on the actual filament you're using as to how well they sand. If you try and use a power sander, you can sometimes just melt it and it clags rather than sanding properly. So what I would do normally is spray putty, because I live in the UK and Europe, and we can get spray putty. Motip spray putty I use. It's really good. In North America, you can only get filler primer, which has a paint element to it. It actually isn't as nice, I don't think. It just seems a bit claggier when you're sanding it, but it wet sands beautifully. So my favourite thing is to spray putty a lot and then wet sand. I've been experimenting on the Trailblazer, so I'll be talking about that in a minute. So I won't say anything more about other filling techniques. But knock it back a bit to get rid of the raise, and then do some kind of light filling. And then quite often, if you look at any of my videos, I did the whole of the Transport Delta and I didn't even fill it. I just painted with a sponge, and the texture masks a lot of it. So I don't even bother about filling it on some of them. It just something you have to accept with FDM. But if you've got a faster machine, and the 4's quite fast, just print at a lower height and it's less obvious. Stephen says, my biggest problem with modelling is I have a habit of overthinking things. It is, sometimes you just have to do it, but this is a very big project to get something as simple as this, or as complex as this, wrong. So I'm probably going to end up printing the whole middle section first for the left, not for the right, because the right is smaller shelves and I'm less worried about it in some ways. But the left has got these floating shelves and things that are supported by it. So yeah, I've got to say, I am overthinking probably. I just need to get on. Monique agrees it is a problem. So Timber says, I've always resisted FDM because of the lines. I started in resin, went to FDM for functional parts, went back to resin for terrain, FDM. So I went then to resin almost full time. Had a lot of warping with resin long term on things like buildings. So I went back to FDM for doing my terrain Kickstarters because it just is better. You can drop it. I know resins have now caught up a lot, but I still don't think resin is as functional as FDM for usage in terrain, which is quite big and put out in games and used a lot. But with the new speedy printers and 0.08 and matte filament, I have to say, you can't beat it. You really can't. And, you know, layer lines. We'll have a look at the Trailblazer printing. There's a lot of it printing in a minute. So, yeah. So matte filament. Monique says it's good for larger items. It really is. I do think that. Rolando, matte filament, I'll look that one up. Try not to use Overture. I tried Overture and it was just too rough and it ate away at all my printers. So do check the reviews on people have said about your bamboo or Overture or whatever you decide to use. So Tim says, I could not live with the lines in 1:76. I'm doing my Trailblazer and by the end of it, you're not going to see a single layer line. It's all sanded out and it isn't taking much. I have a lot of resonance lines, but actually hardly any layer lines. Rolando, nozzles wear out in FDM. That's new to me. So my first printers, you know, I only swapped the nozzles when they clogged. And when it gets so bad, it's 50p for a new nozzle on a Neptune. So I'd swap it out and I must have swapped them a load with the matte because they kept clogging really badly and it's cheaper to swap the nozzle. With the bamboo being 30 quid because you have to swap the whole assembly, I'm kind of less keen to swap the whole nozzle out. But it was worn down a good mil or two when I swapped it. And that is the matte, it really is. But you'll see how much I've printed on it already. So yeah, they do. Keep an eye on it. When it starts looking less pointy and more flat, it will change the flow. So Bill's off. Happy holidays, or happy Christmas if you're in the UK. And the rest of the world from America. I think it's because you have Thanksgiving, you say happy holidays, because there we go. But anyway, happy Christmas, happy New Year, all that kind of stuff. I'll see you in the new year, Bill. So Rolando, Motip spray putty, I'll take a note of that one. There's any automotive spray putty, it's automotive, and wet sand it if you can, because it is resinous. It's a nasty solvent spray. It's not nasty, but it's a solvent spray. Spray it outside. Or because it will just flood an airbrush booth. So spray outside if you can, put a nice even coat on. You may take 3 or 4 coats if you've done big layer lines and you've got an older machine that has a lot of issues, but it will, I've done it down to metallic level with just spray putty. It does work well. So Nigel Saunders, the bonsai zone. Hello Kathy, my older 3D prints always seem to warp and shrink over time. Is this the printer settings or is this quite normal? Is this in resin or FDM? If it's resin, yeah, they do. Resin just does move over time. And I think you have to choose different resin if you're worried about that. Your FDM shouldn't be changing that much. So, yeah. Rolando, so do you use a 0.8 nozzle for your terrain instead of the standard? No, I use 0.4. I use 0.4. If anything, I was going to go, I'd go to a 0.2, but I'd want that on a separate printer. And it's not that hard to swap on a bamboo. It's just two screws and a plugs. But no, a 0.2. People are printing mini quality stuff with 0.2 nozzles now. They're doing some really good. PLA. I have never had my old PLA shrink. That's interesting. I've never had it shrink. I haven't had it warp either. I'm printing with, I don't know, 8 to 15% infill. These were 15 because I'm having problems with pillowing. Talk about that in a sec. And 2 walls. And I've not had anything do that. That sounds really weird. Talking about it, I'm going to put it on. So I had a lot of problems with the Trailblazer prints. New printer, me being distracted with Kickstarter, just shoving prints on one after the other to get it done because I wasn't test printing much. So these are just some camera snaps. I think the first one was a slice error. I think it just tried to do 2 different types of sort of infill. It was weird because I resliced them and they were fine. But you can see on these, I'm getting this pillowing. And this, I eventually ended up slowing down the solid infill. And this is one of the problems with printing at 0.08. You get, how can I put this? You get less flow of plastic out the nozzle. So you get some weird effects. Now this is resonance or something. I started to get this all over my prints. Now I think some of it, people are saying it's under extrusion, but it files back, it sands back flush. And I was getting it on both printers, just randomly, but mostly on Ben. And I don't know that I've fixed it. It does look a little bit like it's stuttering when you look at that infill. So I'm not, it may have been that the nozzle was worn and something wasn't quite right. But I really struggled no matter which printer. So Ben is the old printer and Maul is the newer bamboo. I have 2 bamboos running. So all this early stuff will be on Ben and then there's Maul running at the same time. And yes, I did name my printers Ben and Maul and my Saturn 4 Ultra is Jar Jar. So all the ones that have network names have got names from, you can guess where, I think with Ben, Maul and Obi-Wan just seemed too long, so I went with Ben. And then Jar Jar was long, so I was like, yeah, whatever, I've just broken that. But you can see here that pillowing is because the first layer that goes down after the infill, which then the neat layers go on, just wasn't running over. And I have a lot of problems on these with holes, like the clip holes. 0.08 does not like to go. Now I can do them really messily if I click thick bridges on and it will put all the flow out. But it is really messy and it will mess out other bits of your print. So I show, because I have the time-lapse feature, you've got all the time-lapses for the Trailblazer. So I probably need to tell you what the Trailblazer is. This is a ship from Star Wars Outlaws. I've played something like 130 hours of it this year, according to my Xbox end of year summary. Came out at the end of August, like literally the end of August. And I played it through. I've got the DLC, the Sabak one to play. I did a Sabak print actually from the game, which was my last video. This is going to be a video at some point when I get around to finishing it. And I had a load of issues where things just weren't neat. And I'm not sure how, I think some of this is the worn nozzle because it was definitely worn. Some of it is Maul though, and his nozzle isn't worn. He was brand new. So it's a beautiful ship, but I've had a number of issues with the order I glued it. And so I've had some fit issues, but this is just a standard matte filament at 0.4. This piece doesn't fit, and I think it's because I've tipped the front up slightly when I glued them together. So I need to sand that bit back as well. I don't think you can, I know this is very low quality, I don't think you can really see the print lines that much on them. You know, it's the same finish as this one here. I have to say this is a beautiful ship. It was from his Patreon. I suspect it will go on Gumroad at some point. I did find a couple of print things that I've fed back to him about stuff not going on the build plate, and you may or may not see that on this. I had to stop one because one of these bits sticking out wasn't actually attached to the build plate. And then I realised there were quite a few of them that weren't, so I went and changed them all in Blender so they fitted. And there was a couple of other things that didn't print that well. I didn't realise how bad the resonance was, and so I probably should have reprinted some of the pieces. But the ones that caused me the most problems were these. These are the, you can see how thin that is. These were the original sort of front window frame. You'll see it when I start putting it together. And it just kept breaking. They kept snapping and breaking. And I slowed it down to 50 for everything. And it still kept snapping and breaking. And you can see here, I printed them several times. I mean, this is Maul, and they just, oh, there we are, that's broken. It just wasn't strong enough. Now, I don't know that it's the matte filament maybe isn't the best. The 0.08 doesn't help. But anyway, I went back to Tellus, I think it's Oscar is his name, and said to him, how did he print them? Because I just couldn't get this to print. I tried it with supports and it snapped. I tried it all sorts of ways and it just didn't work. And I actually put them together myself and did them in a different orientation. But that left loads of cleanup required because shallow curves are the main cleanup on this. And that one broke straight away. And eventually he came back and actually made me a thicker set. You see how many times I tried to print these because there's a left and a right. So I did it this way and it worked, but then there's a lot of cleanup on these shallows. So he actually redid them thicker for me, having spoken to him. He's been really good actually. Every time I've asked him a question or something, he's redone a piece if needed. And some of it might just be my printing. I'm not saying that those pieces wouldn't print properly, just that I couldn't print them properly. And I slowed this down and I don't know what it was. But anyway, I slowed it down, still didn't work. He sent me the pieces and I redid them. So I was really, really happy. You know, he did a great job. That's actually a droid. That is, it's not a Trailblazer. That's a bit of droid. It's the underneath of the head. Yeah, okay. That's the insides. So I think these must be Ben Them Maul or something going through. So anyway, it was interesting. This piece here, when I put it together, I warped it. I think it didn't print very well. Nigel, I don't know what the answer is. Sorry, I don't know why they would be doing that with normal PLA. I notice if I take things off a hot bed because I'm impatient and I them off, you know, and you can do that very easily. You know, you flex the thing and off they pop. If they're big flat pieces and it's hot still, sometimes they will warp if they're quite thin. So I always try and leave the big flat pieces to cool on the bed unless I'm really impatient, because that's how you do get warping otherwise. So sorry I couldn't help more. Stephen said, did I get to the National Model Railway show at the NEC? No, I didn't. I didn't realise it was happening straight away. And then I was trying to get some work done on this. This is the resonance. So this will be Ben. See that resonance there? I don't know what was causing it. Eventually I slowed down by 50, I think. I took it to 150. That was it. And I don't know if it's on the inside or the outside. And the overhangs aren't neat on Ben. And I think most of this was coming down to the nozzle being worn. Quite mesmerising to watch though. Orlando, regarding FDM filler setting for hollow space within your prints, what do you think is the optimal for infill? Is it 10% or higher or lower? I did 8 as standard. These, because I was having the pillowing and I have a lot of shallow curves on this, and it was only really showing on shallow, but there's a lot of shallow on this because it's a slightly curved ship. I actually put it to 15 for this. Normally I do 8, but because it's 0.08, I'm finding that 0.08 won't bridge the gap that well. If I was doing 0.2 as my layer height, I'd be at 8%, but I think for the 0.08, which I'm doing to get the quality, I'm just struggling if I drop the infill down. So I put it back up to 15, which is the standard. It's quite heavy. If I was doing a droid, I'd do it at 5 to 8% and I'd do a much thicker layer height even on a bamboo probably, and just live with the sanding, which is what I've done. But I did that on my Plus for size, most of it, because it was too tall to fit in my presser. All my Neptune 3s were busy test printing at the time. So, Now, this piece, that piece there, and many of the pieces have very shallow curves like this on them. And that actually is, we talk about resin being better. Because this is 0.08 and resin effectively, a lot of people print at 0.05, especially for big things. And I use 0.025 for minis mostly, and so I use that for everything. But big stuff I put on here. What I was finding was actually the layer lines don't show that much. There is some, and they'll sand out really easily on the mat, but there's not a huge amount. But the biggest problem I've got with the Trailblazer and making it look good is actually the shallow curves, which are sort of flat, and you see the steps. You get it on resin too, and this is, it's not quite twice the layer height of a resin printer, but it's nearly that. And it's the step on a shallow curve that is the most visible. And that's the thing, and the gaps actually where I've got to fill between the sections is where I've had the biggest problems on the Trailblazer. So Monique says she uses 20%. It's a balance between what you want. I mean, they just get heavier and heavier, the prints, the more you use. I've traditionally always done 8. A lot of people I know now are going to lightning, but which saves a lot of filament, and it only puts the infill towards the top. I tried it once, and I didn't feel on my old printers that it really had enough strength on the walls. I felt there was too much bounce on them, so I wasn't that happy. This is this printer trying to print these delicate bits, and it didn't do any better. So to fix my resonance issues, I tried 4 or 5 things before I changed the nozzle, which I think's probably fixed it, but I haven't done any huge prints since then that I've noticed any resonance on. It tends to show most on the big sort of vertical prints, which I've not been doing a huge amount of. You know, ones with flat sides, whereas all the ones I'm doing at the moment have got loads of ins and outs, so there's no real flatness on them. But what I tried putting it on different feet. So it comes on just normal rubber feet. I got 2 packs and then discovered you can do 2 printers out of 1 pack of their anti-vibration feet. And now my printers do this when they're printing. It's really funny. The door goes, but, you know, that didn't help. Slowing helped quite a lot, and fixing the nozzle was the thing I think that probably made the most difference. You can use anti-alias on resin, Timber says. You can, yeah. You can't on FDM though. So this is all the pieces laid out to see. I didn't glue it in the order they said, and I introduced some false errors as a result. But I have just a few pieces that I've glued, like these pieces, and I glued them and I weighted them flat, and somehow they're still not as flat as they should be. And as a result, when I came to do the sides, I've got misalignments. So what he suggests is you do that, and then you put on the pieces that are sort of, you can just see at the very bottom of the screen and the very top of the screen, in the middle. You put those on next. But the glue area is actually really small. And I was worried it wasn't a lot of glue area and I wouldn't line it up very well. So I wanted to put at least one end on before I glued those on. I probably should just have tacked it in place, because actually I glued that end straight, I thought. I weighted it and everything, but I don't think the, somehow I didn't do it. It's just slightly canted back. So actually the whole side ends up 1 millimetre out. But it's actually about 2 or 3 millimetres out at the bottom. But what I don't understand is when I put the top on, there's actually a lid that goes on top. It lines up perfectly at the beginning, and by the end it's out by quite a lot. It's out by maybe 2 mil, 3 mil, and yet everything is just banged up to it. There's no elephant's footing particularly or anything. It's all banged up close, and both, I don't really understand why there's some of the faults I've got on it. But I do know I put the front on and the interior does not go in properly. So I need sanding the front interior piece is actually the bit in the nose is the next thing. Edsgard, hey Kathy, just sent a video to Rend and saw you streaming. How's things? Fine, thanks Ed. It took me so long to render out this Trailblazer video, partly because it's going up onto a NAS. It took forever to render, and then I had to copy it over to my hard drive to play it to see if I can get it to play in the hour runtime rather than 2 hours. And it took like 2 hours to copy across. So I've seemed to have spent all my time rendering and copying over the last, that went up today to do. So yeah, it took several hours to render and then several hours to copy. Ed says 3D prints can warp quite a lot in some very odd ways. Possibly it's that. I find resin far worse than PLA, and I think it's because PLA is chunkier. I do find it's dimensionally more accurate, but not necessarily accurate. So despite the fact that I test fit this, that bit going on the front there and these bits here, that's where the biggest errors have been. The back is not actually attached yet, and you'll see that in a minute. So this is just going to run for a bit. I have to say I've been very impressed with the matte filaments. It's the first time I've really had to sand it, and the big problem I have is places like this. If you look at that piece, you can see it looks like someone's done some nice lawn mowing down it. There's sort of stripes across it. That is a shallow, straight, just a shallow curve, really shallow. And that's each of the layers. So I've had to fill those. And I was trying 2 new fillers on the droids. And one of the droids, I did a test head, and I tried wood filler, and I found it goes on easily, but it's gritty, so it doesn't fill small bits, and you can dry sand it. It dry sands fine actually, but if you wet sand it, it will come back off really quickly. So it's a good way to put in a gross one and then wet sand a huge amount back off, but obviously it takes too much back off. And if you wonder, I'm using 5-minute epoxy for all of these. Because it gives me time to get it to set. It also then gives it time for it to go out of alignment when I leave the room, which I think happened on the droid more than this. And these have these sort of bits that go in, and he did say you should leave the front and back separate for storage. I've glued them so I can get a better finish, because this is actually, it's about the size of the Transport Delta, I think, when it's all together. Not as wide, but about as long. So yeah. Stephen says the quality of the prints are amazing. Oh yeah, I mean the bamboo does nice prints, so it's partly that. Partly it's the matte filament helps, and part of it is the 0.08 layer lines, are really good. So there's kind of a lot of parts in there. And you can see on the side there, I've actually sanded the top half of that, and the bottom half of it hasn't been sanded yet. That is these kind of resonance issues I was getting that took me a lot of prints to notice, because I just banged out a couple before I even noticed, because they were on the underside of it, and then B, to fix. So yeah, I did eventually, I think, fix them, but time will tell. I rarely do a flat side if I can help it, and it does help if you haven't got flat sides with some of the ringing and sort of other issues you often see on these big prints. I thought you put out the wrong end of the stir in the epoxy for a second there. Probably did actually, it wouldn't be the first time. Monique, if FDM is printing to a thin sloping corner, they can lift off the print bed and warp. They can, and brims are really good for holding down if you have that problem. I tend to use 3D lac. I've never really used the textured bed before. This is all printed on the flat bed because I wanted flat joins. This is where I had problems, this piece here. I shouldn't have glued this together separately. I should have glued it in place with other pieces, because this is glued in every way wrong. But it is flat on the bottom, so I thought if I just glued it flat with the other piece, it'd be fine. And no, it isn't. It's slightly wonky, and it's just not good. It's not good gluing that one piece. These 2 pieces. So I'm using this wood filler a lot for anything big, because it goes on really easily, it dries quite quickly, sands well, wet sands a dream. And the other filler that I've got is Liquitex Flexible Acrylic Modelling Paste that I'd been recommended people using it all the time on their cosplay. Now, I struggled with it. The wood filler, dry sands and wet sands, but it's a little gritty. So it's never going to give you a fine scale model surface, but I was planning on spray puttying any surface that I used it on, but it's good for big bits because it's quite a thick filler. And I don't want to use epoxy car putty for two reasons, or Bondo in America, but we don't have Bondo in this country. One, it stinks, and so my house will stink and I'll be sitting there with a mask on all day for days doing all this. Two, it's really solid, so it's hard to sand off. You have to use some kind of electronic and it's a lot harder. This, someone said to me on Instagram, you must have spent ages sanding. I'm like, I can wet sand the whole bottom of this piece in 2 minutes because the acrylic, the Liquitex and the wood fillers just come straight back off when they get wet. And so you're effectively just using the sandpaper to smooth off with a wet solution. So you've got something really smooth, and then they just seem to dry back down again. So, yeah, I was shocked. But this, I thought it was straight. It was all lined up, but somehow it isn't quite right. Yeah, that was a bad one. And actually gluing it then onto the end piece didn't help either. Resin prints, I think, are worse than filament for warping in thin. So resin, I've found, if you have different wall sections, I did the Type S from Second Dynasty, and it comes out to a point at the edges, and I'd shrunk it, and what I found was the edges did this with the resin. They just warp up. I think PLA I find warps while it's hot to cold, but if you let it dry on the plate, it's a lot better. Resin, the thin bits will shrink at a different rate to the thicker bits. All resin shrinks, so it's almost guaranteed to curl. Rolando, you stated that your Neptune, I have a Neptune 3, and it was my bamboo that wore out, and not I don't have a Neptune 4. I have a Neptune 3 Pros, and I'd had them, one of them, for years, but the matte filament did it in a month or so, and that was overture. But I mean, bear in mind, I'm printing 24/7 on mine. The bamboo wore out after a couple of, maybe 3 months with matte filament. Yeah, I knew I was going to ping one of these, and I did. They've actually miraculously stayed intact since then, but they are very delicate. I probably would have designed this to print them separately and plug them in at the end. But there we go. Neptune 4 components have worn out or are getting there. Which will you have to buy replacements for? So I actually also had on my Neptune 3s, one of them I had to replace the extruder gears, which had worn out. On my presser, they haven't worn at all. But what I find is sometimes the grub screw comes loose and you have to put it back. So yeah. But really, someone else will tell you what wears out, but everything wears over time. The Tuffy tube can show wear. Anywhere where filament drags through will eventually wear. So anything in your filament feed path will eventually wear. But the nozzles are the biggest one, I think, because they're also heated. And I definitely had extruder gear issues as well. This is a heel grinder for getting your dead skin off your heel. And what I like about it is it doesn't go that fast. It's also really useful because it's smaller than a mouse or something, but it's electronic, so it does it. It's quite a rough sandpaper, but it was good for things like this, and I will use it again. I'm trying to think what I can say about it. It's really good because it doesn't heat it up enough, because it doesn't go fast enough, that it will trigger the PLA melting. Which is an issue. So I've put the wood filler on quite thickly on all of this. You'll see this is actually buttered on. And I tried dry sanding it just for the sake of it, but actually I wet sanded it all very quickly. And I did a lot of the wet sanding in the sink because literally just run the tap on it, put the sandpaper over it, and that will go back in seconds, sanded. So it's really quick. And then I thought, and this is in like another half hour's time, I'll use the Liquitex, because this is a little bit like, I mean, I'm going to put spray putty on, I think, instead. I'll use the Liquitex because I tried that before and I thought it dry sanded, but I couldn't get it to dry sand when I actually did it. So I put a layer of Liquitex on, and what I found was, even with a mouse, which is a big mouse, sander, it wouldn't sand. It just clogged in one or two places and it started to pull off in sections. Now maybe I bought the wrong one, because I noticed afterwards mine was flexible. But what it's really good for is if you put it on, it actually dries quite smooth. And if you put it on with, you'll see sometimes I'm using a piece of EVA foam that's cut out of a flooring. So it's about that big and that thick, and I'm just using it like a spatula, and it will go round corners. If you could put it on as neatly as you can to start with, and you don't need to sand it, it actually isn't too bad. But it will also wet sand down a dream. This is now, by the end of this, got a layer of wood filler, and a layer of Liquitex, and they both ended up being wet sanded, despite the fact, I mean, I prefer wet sanding, but I just find it takes too much off. But the Liquitex is finer and stays in the gaps more. The wood filler, because it's got a slight grain to it, will come out much more easily, and so it will leave more of a divot. So I think I've got to the stage where I still need to get the fit on the interior right, and that's probably tomorrow's job. And I need to get rid of some of these resonance marks still. But I'm pretty sure that the next thing I'm going to do is spray putty, and then sand the spray putty smooth, because it becomes hard to see when you've got a mix of filler. My filler for the Liquitex is quite clear when it's dry, white in places but quite clear. It just becomes really hard to see. So everything is going to get a coat of spray putty on the big flat areas, and then the areas that aren't big and flat, that are really detailed, I'll probably just put a coat of primer on as well, and then I'll see what it all looks like. But you can see here I'm just sanding this with sanding sponges by Despy and normal sanding sponges, and it sands off beautifully. I am really impressed how well this sands. Whatever's in the mat, it's worth it to be able to sand it, because you can't really sand PLA easily. Not smoothly, whereas this will actually sand to a nice smooth texture. So Ed says, Ed Scar, nozzles are considered a standard wear part for FDM machines. Similarly, FEP sheets and res machines. Yeah, I mean, I bought 20 nozzles for a tenner or something for my, and they go on all three of my Neptunes. I've still got two of the Neptunes on the side in the kitchen on the heated floor. I think I'm going to rip them apart and use their Zs for like a container lift area. Probably something like that, maybe. We'll have a see. So it'll do like a container port. But yeah, I mean, I was swapping my nozzles every couple of weeks with the matte filament on the Neptunes, probably because they were brass nozzles, not hardened. And it just, I think the Overture was too aggressive. But you know, my presser, I haven't really swapped. I swapped it eventually at the end of it, but I didn't swap it at all really. Presser stuff is often better made, and the extruder gears are still fine. One of my Neptunes had worn through and the other was fine, and it has actually been a new one that was worn through, funnily. So, you know, you can replace them several times a year. Sometimes you can print for a year. It really depends what filament you're printing and how often you're printing. Bear in mind, I'm normally running my printers 24/7. They don't stop. So yeah, I'm doing way more than most people. So Rolando says, yeah, I'm reading now on the internet. Some people mentioned that the FDM extruder gears were out earlier. That's the one I mentioned, yeah. People often say, oh, it's under extrusion and da-da-da-da. And sometimes when you're getting those issues of what looks like under extrusion, which is like holes in your print and skipping a bit, that can be your extruder gears. Sometimes they're just slipping, which isn't a problem on the Neptune. They don't slip, but on my presser they were slipping. Sometimes they're literally just worn. So Ed says, my CR10 had dozens of replacement nozzles, half a metre of Bowden tube, a couple of heat elements, a few thermometers, a replacement feeder mechanism, the whole lot, not just the gear, even fans. for the control box. This is over several years. I'm not surprised. I mean, on my Prusser, the wires into the hotbed broke on mine just from going back and forth so much, and Prusser do a replacement part, and I had to undo it, screw it, redo it. And it's a very, very helpful Prusser, and it wasn't an expensive part to get. So, I've even done the cables that go into the back of the heat bed. If you use a 3D printer a lot, you need to maintain them. You need to check your belts. On the Bamboo, the other thing I fixed on Ben was you can do the belts. It's a very long belt because it's a Core XY, so it's not a bed shifter. It doesn't do X, Z on the gantry and then Y on the bed. It does, the bed just literally goes up and down. And the top has one really long, or two it is actually, belts that move it in a Core XY. And they go onto pulleys on the back, and they go up or down on those pulleys because some of the stuff is obviously not quite square, and it could be the whole box is out of square. There was a whole thing on how to do that, and it looked very complex, and I'm like, okay. But anyway, I did retension my belts on the back, which involves trying to get them slightly straighter, because obviously they slip to the inner edge. And I then did a lot of calibrations on belt tensioning to try and do that as well. So I did think it was belt problems at first with the resonance. Slowing it down just helped, but actually under 120 speed, they say you get even more resonance with the Bamboo. So there is a sweet spot, I suspect. So yeah, you have to understand that all of the things in a printer will eventually wear out because you're putting a lot of heat, a lot of movement, and a lot of grinding parts past them. Even on a resin printer, I've put new screens on them. Not all my printers, but on some of the printers. Most of mine, all my Anycubics are broken on Z going up or down, at which point I've given up. But I've had a new motherboard on my Elegoo Plus because I did something that shorted it out while trying to hot swap a nozzle. I don't know what I did. Anyway, I shorted something out. And they sent me a whole new motherboard. So that wasn't hard to replace. You have to take it apart. It's not small, but you have to take it apart and get it. So yeah, people think 3D printers are plug and play. And Bamboo is the nearest I've come to that. But even on a Whizzy Bamboo that everyone raves about and says does brilliant print quality, you can see I've got resonance issues that took me quite a lot of prints to actually nail, properly. Because it got better, but it wasn't perfect. And there we go. Flexible is the enemy of sandable. Definitely, says Ed. Flexible filling scrapers, carbon steel putty knives, plastering decorating tools, or a putty knife would be better for applying filler. Yeah, I actually quite like the EVA foam because it's slightly bendy. So it's good for the corners on this. But also because it's small and thick. But I'm sure there are far better things people have out there for doing stuff. Ed says, have you considered smoothing before the filler sets? Depends on the chemical in your process, of course, but it might mean no sanding required. I tried ABS, warped like mad, stinks like heck. I hated it, needed an enclosure, I melted my printer, never touching ABS again. And I tried doing acetone smoothing with that, couldn't get it to work. Don't know if my filament just didn't work that well, but no. PLA doesn't really have an equivalent. You can't chemically smooth it easily. And the chemicals that are involved are nasty. And again, this is in my house. I don't want nasty chemicals. This is me dry sanding. I get bored of this real quick. But yeah, I haven't managed to chemically. And what I found was it softened all the edges, but didn't smooth out the ridges. So it lost detail and definition without losing my lay lines. It didn't achieve what I wanted it to. So, no, I haven't ever got it to work, sadly. So Timber says you can effectively scrape off the excess and only fill the troughs. That is definitely the technique that I've got some cabinet scrapers that are good for that. The layer lines are so fine on this that I've not really worried too much about it. Where I have the issues, as I've said, are the it's not the side layer lines, which is what most people mean when they mean layer lines. It's the steps on the shallow pieces like this. Ed says, oh, that's a good idea. I've not thrown out my CR10, so maybe it needs to become a terrain piece now. Yes, I did actually. I've got one piece down here. I took one apart. I think it was my Mega i3 or whatever. And I've got all the bits and the print belts used. But it was a bit flimsy and it never worked 100% as well as I'd like. So I think next time I'd do it completely on 3D prints, or I'd actually put it into the wood so it's kept, and try and keep more of the actual printer. Edscar, all of my FDM machines have been temperamental as all Heckins, and yet ever resin printer has been quite plug and play. Oh, my first resin printer was an Anycubic Photon, and it would not level. I levelled, bad print. I levelled, bad print. I levelled, wouldn't print. Levelled, wouldn't print. Levelled. I was so frustrated. It was anything but plug and play. And then eventually the Z-height broke, and I bought an Elegoo Mars, and it was straight out the back levelled. I think they've come a long way. So I think it depends when you bought into each of the different types. You know, if you bought it as a, if you buy in now, your experience of printers, especially if you're buying something like a Bamboo, which are very reasonably priced, or an Elegoo Saturn 4, you know, they are plug and play. My biggest problem with the Saturn is it changes its max limit when it tilts its build plate, and suddenly what wasn't over the max is now over the max, which is frustrating. I've had to take so many cupfuls of resin back out because it's overfilled. But yeah, I think it depends when you got into it. None of my Anycubics back in the day were printed, you know, plug and play. I would say the Elegoos were getting there, but you have to assemble them. The Bamboo, it's more just follow the red arrows and take the packing screws out, and away it goes. So this is why I like the plastic one here. It's really good for going around these corners. I'm sure there are proper things that you can do, but the foam worked really well there. Monique, my Anycubic Viper was pretty much a plug and play, Kathy. It's been really reliable. I think I'm probably 3 or 4 years before the Viper with my Mega i3. Back in the day, you know, I mean, it was only 2018. If you think about it, it was only 6 years ago I bought them. But the world has changed a lot. And yeah. So Monique says, mine was part of the Kickstarter or pre-order early release. It's still, as Stephen says, it's still evolving. You know, I think the next big things certainly in stuff like FDM, though I think there'll be some increase in the material technology, but I think supports and the way they work. You can do supports now with the multi-material, but they're just so wasteful, the multi-material, with the amount of primes and purges, that I think that's the next big thing to do. And the next Bamboo out, I think, is going to be a dual head. So you don't get as much waste because you literally stay primed, and I could see that working really well with stuff that needs supports. Though, of course, I still have to design for people who have enders and stuff like that. So I'm always going to be support free for ease of printing. And actually, I think supports mar the surface. I've used them a lot on my droids, and none of my circles are circular with my supports. They're all going to need a lot of filling. And I think the wood filler is going to be out a lot for those. So yeah. Ed says, silly trick I tried was to lower the build plate into the resin before filling so you can get the max line properly. But these days I just fill as it's printing so I know it won't overflow. Probably lazy. This one tilts, the Saturn 4, and you have a little like thing you clip round it, drip catcher, when you pour it in, and it's a really weird build plate. So you don't want to pour the resin over the build plate anymore, because inside of the springs, the first thing I did was dunk it in my IPA vat and it filled up, and I was like, oh crap. So I had to pull it out, and then I've liquid gunk IPA, because it's the pre-wash, everywhere inside. I had to pull it all apart and dry it off, and it's really gunky inside because it's a self-leveling and springed, so you can't do it, and it doesn't fit in any of my vats. It's the only frustration of moving to a new printer is everything gets bigger each time and it doesn't fit in your existing cleaning solution. There we go. This is the worst one for the shallow, and I've still got a bit more work to do on this. It's had only Liquitex and a set of like a quick wet sand. It really needs a lot more dry sanding, but I was running out of oomph. So I think it'll get the spray putty and then it will get some more sanding. Rolando, what's your favourite test prints for FDM printers when you get a new one or have recalibrated? I just put my next print on. I do a benchy when I buy a new printer because it's a rite of passage, but I just put the next print on and start printing and see if it works. For resin, I do the Siraya Tech one, but I just end up, again, generally, this time I printed a Rancor. It was really tough to get the supports off, so I went a little bit lighter on the, smaller on the layer exposure for the next one. I'd use the same setting as the Mars in the same, and I guess this one's got a slightly stronger whatever, but yeah, it was fine. Ed says I've never printed a benchy. Yeah, but no, I don't do test prints. What I do on my non-bamboos, on my Elegoo's, especially on the Plus one, is I'll print a first layer. They have it on the presser. This is what I should have done differently, this bit here. I'll do a first layer calibration just to check it's completely leveled. On my Plus, one of the screws had come out of its socket, so I actually had to, took me a while to realise I had to take the build plate off, just the removal one off, because it wasn't levelling properly, and it was because one of the nuts had actually come out of the screw. Now this is what I did wrong. I should have put this in place when I glued that front piece on so that it was nice and level. See how flush it is there? And that would have been fine, but I was worried there wasn't enough grippage. It's just literally a few square inches for those side pieces, and I was just worried about it. So I glued the front on because I thought, oh, that'll work well. And that all fits in there now, but now it doesn't fit. At the moment, nothing fits at the front. There's a hole there, which is frustrating. I think it's the finger to get it open because it is terrain. But that piece won't fit on, and I think actually it went down then when I took it out. I think it does need just something. So when I glued that bit that's on the right under my head onto the middle bit, the left-hand side's not glued yet, I glued it just slightly tilted, and that's caused me a lot of problems. Everything is now pushed slightly off, so I need to do quite a lot more sanding and filling. I'm really not going to do much on the interiors. This bit needed cutting out because it actually fouled, so I just sawed it out and left that piece there. I did do a couple of extra tops where I could just that there. I actually made a couple of pieces with some extra bits tagged on in Blender to fill the gaps on the sort of sides, just for fun. And I'm putting these on now. Just I haven't filled them. I'm not sure I need to. I'm generally not doing as much with the interior at the moment, but it will be separate so that I can paint it more easily. And it's it's a fairly grubby but nice interior. It's not as grubby as the Millennium Falcon, but I like the ship. I think it's a nice design. It's a very square ship, and it's, as I said, it's as big as my Transport Delta, which if Tamsin was on, she'd know what I was talking about. Transport Delta's second dynasty ship, which I've printed, but nowhere near as wide. But this just looks like miles better in quality. That one I did quite quickly from a Kickstarter campaign where I was having it as an option, and it was really quick. So yeah. So that back one does not sit flush, but this front one should have more or less sat okay, and it doesn't. And this bit here, see how it does line up, and then I do this and it somehow doesn't line up by the end. I did something in the gluing here, and so it's a beautiful design, but yeah, I've introduced some gluing errors. It's 1:48. Well, it's Legion scale, so some people do it as 1:47, but I suspect it's about that. So 1:48, so 35 mil. I'm assuming it's 1:48 because that's what I use. So it's about that. So O scale in railway money. I really like it. That's American O, because obviously British O is a different size. I really like it, but you can see here I weighted it so it was it was flat there, but yeah, I shouldn't have weighted that, I think. I was trying to get that to just sit flush underneath, so it lined up, and it was nice and smooth underneath, but yeah, I should have, I don't know. See, and I checked it there and it looked all right. I don't know if it then sagged when I went out. Actually, one side's not so bad, but the other side is. So I just think it's not quite square. So when you look there, it looks fine. But somehow when it's glued together, it isn't. So this line, and actually that side's not as bad as the other side. So I think I just tested on the wrong side. There we go. So Ed says, yes, I print a lot in 1:56 for bolt action, so it seems similar. Yeah, I mean, it's a chunky size. It's going in Junk Room City somewhere, but I'm not quite sure where. It is actually a bit long to fit in my ups and downs, as is the Transport Delta. But I just fancy, I subscribe to his Patreon for a month or so, because he does lovely stuff, but I don't need the other stuff as I design terrain. But there was no way I was going to design this myself. I would like to design a ship, and I've got Maul's Scimitar 95% designed from last Christmas, and I probably should just get around to, yeah. So Ed says, I've been tempted to print a Firefly in this scale. It would be nice. I like the Firefly, it's a nice ship. So have you had a go at printing a large scale size Millennium Falcon, and did it turn out okay? So I printed the Transport Delta. It was fine. It's a Second Dynasty design, so it's like it, but not exactly the same. So it's definitely inspired by very closely, but not identical to. And you can see here the gap at the bottom and the gap at the top are not the same on this. This is just a couple of mil out, but it's annoying enough that it's frustrating, especially on that one side. So yeah, it was great. I do enjoy it. I haven't done anything with it, and I still need to redo the interior. Not redo, but it's just painted. I need to add life into it. But yeah, definitely. It's the Transport Delta if you want to have a look on Second Dynasty. And he does it in 28mm, which is... oh, I don't know what size that is. What's 28mm? 1/60th? I think he does 1/58th, 1/59th. I work on 1/60th. And then I actually scaled it up to 35mm, so I did it 20% bigger. Oh, sort of. So yeah, so that's the size it's natively sat at. Yeah, and I scaled it up. I said 28 and 35 is, difference is 7, so I did it by 125%, something like that, to get my really big one. Hi Kamanga, nice to have you. Yeah, we're talking Trailblazers. So this ship is from Star Wars Outlaws, so it is a Star Wars ship. It's quite a, it's like it's in the plot. It's an original design. It's quite an old one. So the guy who does it owns it, really likes it, and you kind of nick it. So there we go. There's a lot of nicking in Outlaws. So Ed says, hero scale and true scale don't match. So a great big, it depends on that. Yeah, I find that really frustrating. So all of my stuff's done at 1:48, and I found my figures do look quite small compared to most people's figures because they are 1:48. So unless people are modelling 7 foot high people, my figures do look very fine scale by comparison. So 5-minute epoxy gives you working time. On a few pieces, on say my droids, where I just wanted to get it set and it was a really obnoxious piece to hold and it was quite big, I actually will put dabs of super glue around the outside as well because it will sand, and I just then zap the super glue and let the epoxy set up in the middle. So the super glue will hold the joint, but I don't find super glue is good on big joints like this. So yeah, it makes it a quicker grab. I know other people do the same with hot glue, and I certainly, when I've done hot glue, I might have mixed it with other things. So Ed says, I've mixed 28 millimetre hero scale and 156 true scale infantry in my British Army for bolt action. They're all the same height but look skinny, bulky in comparison. Well, there's tall people, there's short people, there's fat people and there's thin people. I've got 28 and 35 mixed up while I've printed my figures because I've got a lot from Papsicles that are 28mm. I've got a lot of 35mm figures that I've printed for Legion, and despite all of that, I generally just shove them all on together because I don't think it really matters that much, you know. People are, you have small people. My mum's short, my dad's tall. I'm used to people being like nearly a foot difference in height. In fact, there's more than a foot difference between my parents because my mum's 5 foot nothing, my dad's 6'4". So that's that bit there. Those two bits are the only gluing areas on this side, which is why I did it the way I did it, so I could screw it on the back and on the front. But this piece here, especially this one side, was just out, and you can see on the near side it's not too bad, but on the far side it was far worse. Wargaming scale varies so much between creators. They do, and what you'll find is people will say, oh, Darkfire and Hokusa will go together because they use very similar fine scale. So I'm subscribed to only a couple of patrons. Hokusa, who isn't actually doing any Star Wars at the moment, he's doing Samurai, which look really cool, but I don't need another obsession. And Darkfire, who does all sorts of stuff. He's doing some Halo as well at the moment, which is cool because I've got Halo Flashpoint sat around. And I like him because he's very fine scale. But some of the others are really more caricature, which you might say suits the games and the way of painting. It just doesn't suit me as a scale modeller. So I do prefer the finer scale type ones. So it is about finding creators you like, and then, you know, people will say, oh, you should scale this person up this amount for them to match. I often use a Darkfire clone as my standard person because I've got it saved in a Blender file somewhere, and I find that quite useful. Digger says this is an incredible build, really impressive. Yeah, it was beautiful files. There's been a couple of things that I've glued wrong. What I really want to do is get the last bit of sanding done maybe tomorrow, and then as the weather dries, it's getting colder but drier, I need to put some spray putty on. Now I've left it at this side and not glued the back on. Even this won't fit in my airbrush booth, but I then need to paint it, and I'm probably going to do that in my airbrush booth. So there will be quite a lot of paint to go on still. It's mainly an artistic choice of how the proportional scaling works. I don't mind mixing different styles so long as they aren't wildly different in size. I dislike the really chunky head style with massive heads that some wargaming gets. My favourite style is actually the Shatterpoint one that's really quite very fine and thin, and quite thin because those animes that they're based on are very thin as well. So this was the Liquitex experiment that really didn't work. It just didn't work at all. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this. It's a good product, this modelling paste. It's nice and flexible, it dries well, and it wet sands beautifully. So I might use it on my droids just to use it up, because I suspect it will fill layer lines and then wet sand off in like seconds. So it makes it really good, and then spray putty will probably balance out the difference. So I might end up using it. I've got a lot of front back problems on that. This near side, I think it is. One of the sides has some front back issues. You can see some big gaps to fill. So yeah, I don't think these are quite filled properly on the side yet, so they're probably going to get sanded a bit more, but they'll probably get some spray putty first. But I think what I'll try and do is spray putty the flatter bits and then miss out all that detail. I mean, there's actually some feet to go in as well, somewhere. Yeah, I haven't done much with them. So yeah, but it is, you know, as in all these things, there's a lot of creators. There's a lot of people doing things. You can normally find something in a style you like. This stuff is actually really nice to put on. It's very thin. It's a sort of like really thick face cream, for those of you who put face cream on. So it's a nice product, and it actually didn't dry that uneven. You just can't dry sand it. So I need it to be right before I put on the spray putty, because I won't be able to sand it back. But there we go. We'll see. I can always wet sand, I guess. I will wet sand anyway. But what happens is sometimes if you wet sand an acrylic product with something like a solvent product over the top, is it kind of causes it to go underneath almost and eat away underneath what you've put on. So I wanted this nice and smooth because you're going to look underneath and you're always going to look along it underneath in an angle that's going to catch the light. But most of the sides you're going to see flat on. And there's also going to be a lot of painting that's very stippled. I'm not going to pre-shade the panels. I'm going to pre-shade a sort of mottled effect all over. So it's going to have a lot of mottling on the pre-shade. I just need to put a new filter in the bench vent, which will take 10 minutes. And I've been meaning to do it for 3 months. So it's one of those jobs. So yeah, I used this and then I ended up having to wet sand. And when you wet sand, 90% of it comes off. But hopefully enough of it has stayed in the gaps because this one is especially bad. And otherwise I'm going to be doing a lot of sanding, which I think I'm going to have to do anyway. What's the time? Is that 49? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, that one's really dark. So we've got 10 minutes left. This will finish, I think, in... Let me just check. Yes, it's got 4 minutes left. So this one actually worked on time, unlike the last month. So over Christmas, I have a ROTS diorama that I'm doing with Erin, who I've been doing tutorials with. It just doesn't come off with this. Look, this is a mouse. You'd expect it to do something. It's just like sanding proof. It really is. It just doesn't sand. I even went to 80 grit and it wouldn't sand. It doesn't sand. It's really bizarre. So I actually think it would be a really good product if you wanted a protective outcoat or something, because it won't sand. So it's probably really good. Norm's giving me my siren. Whoop, whoop, whoop. 10-minute countdown. Yeah, thanks Norm. So yeah, I went from 240 down to 80 trying to get this to sand and nothing happened. Nothing at all. Nothing came off. It just clogged the bottom bit of the sand and that was it, and made a couple of holes. So really bizarre. Just no matter what you try. So for the droids, I won't be using this with a dry sander, but I might be using it with a wet sander. I'm wet sanding it. And I wouldn't need a mouse for that, which is good. I don't like the dust that the mouse puts out. I've got stuff in my room that's actual models, and I just don't like the particulate in the air. I don't think it's good for you. So I always wet sand if I possibly can, which is why I like the Motip spray putty. It does wet sand beautifully. Jeffrey, don't sell the chop so you'll need it if you do. Yes, I'm going to keep it, but I'm probably going to have to get rid of 2 old resin printers to find space for it, because I don't have much space for storage of stuff like that. Monique says, if I'm doing this for a Kickstarter, which there a lot of finishing many won't do. Oh no, this is a personal project. I'm on a couple of months of trying to get some personal projects done as well. My Kickstarter is the sewer district, which I'm not even going to paint. I don't actually like to paint my Kickstarters too much because I feel that people are then judging the prints and the models by the paint jobs, not by the quality of the design work. So yeah, I won't. Look at this. It's like that's the base sanded in 2 seconds. I know this is spread up, but it really is fast when it wet sands. It just comes straight back off. So yeah, so I bought this one. It's not even my design. It's a personal project. So this is by Tellus War Games. It was on his Patreon, so I think it will be on his store, which I think might be a Gumroad, but it might not be. And yeah, it will be on there fairly soon, I suspect. He's normally a few months behind. And if you wanted to do one, I suspect when I put the YouTube video out, and I put the links on a few things now, sorry if I haven't on this, I think when I put the YouTube video out, hopefully it will be out for sale. I've actually got an email with him with the 1 or 2 issues I had with that one intersection I had to saw off, just so that he knows whether he chooses to then when he does the sale version, put out a version, because obviously he updated the files on Patreon. I can't access that anymore, so I don't, because I stopped on his Patreon because he was doing Geonosis, which I don't need this month. But yeah, I've only got one live Patreon now, and that's Darkfire Designs. And I started Galactic Armory, who have I joined for the year, and it has every single design he's ever done. I do cosplay, and I'm printing his Rancor minis at the moment, and I printed them, but I didn't cure them. And there's a load of resin inside, down the arms, because like you put them to sit on their feet, but their arms are lower. And the resin in the arms inside ate through my hollowed model and shattered the arms. So I'm reprinting them, obviously because they've now got shattered arms, and trying to then tip the resin out of the arms and down. So I keep washing them and hoping, and they keep, every time I wash them, more resin comes out. So yeah. No, Jeffrey, I'm not doing another live before Christmas, he just asked, because this is the December one. So my next one will be the second week of January, which will be the 12th, perhaps. There we go. So that's where I've got to on the Trailblazer. I need to do a bit more sanding, and then it's on to spray putty outside when the weather gets better. But it's been held up because of the weather. I just haven't rushed because I can't go outside. Oh, Digger's put my Patreon up. Oh, thank you, Digger. Yes, I do a 5 to 15, depending how much I talk, weekly video for patrons, or they get an early release if I'm actually doing a YouTube video, which is rare nowadays, I know. So that's on there. So if anybody wants to go over and join it, it's only a couple of quid. So that's cool. Right, well, we've got 6 minutes left. So I can't believe it's the end of another year, and I've had a couple of months where I've not really done much, though I have started on sewers, and I actually have a whole set of sewers ready for a Kickstarter. But you know, it's been an up and down year. I've had some good Kickstarters this year. Pod Racing did well financially. It was a little close to IP for me in the end. Saverna Spaceport I did too much stuff for and didn't do that well, and the Desert Temple did abysmally. So it probably won't have washed its face by the time I put the printer cost through it as well. So yeah, so it's not been superb in some ways. But, you know, I get to do something I love, and I get to talk to you guys about it. So there is a positive to every cloud, and I have great parents who help when I have bills. So, yep, I'm 51 and I still go to my parents when I have bills. I've never done this in my life. I've always stood on my own 2 feet, so I find it really ironic at 51. But there we go. I hope you guys had a great 2024. Mine's had ups and downs, but I'm doing something I really love, and you really can't beat that, and it's a pleasure to be able to share that with all of you and for you to be here. So thank you for coming. I hope you all had a great 2024. Happy Christmas to all you that celebrate it. For you that don't, I just hope you have a great Christmas time of year, even if you're not into Christmas. And thank you to Norm, Digger and Timber, who've been my moderators for all the live streams. You know, they do a great job. Thank you guys. And thank you to everybody who's been here in chat. And thank you to John for coming and lifting my frame when I needed it. That made everything go blippy on my screen. Have a great one, everybody. And I hope you have a really good Christmas time, that you get loads of modelling presents. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2025. And hopefully we'll even have got the Trailblazer maybe finished. It may even be out as a YouTube video before the next live stream, but somehow I doubt it, because there's a lot to do and so many things to do. So have a good one. Take care, everybody. And I'm actually going to finish on time this time. See you in 2025. Oh, that sounds so weird. 2025 already.